"Get the hell out of here, Sarah, you're done with this company," Jason Reynolds declared, raising his champagne glass mockingly. The holiday party fell silent. 87 stunned faces turned toward me as our CEO stood on the makeshift stage. His custom tuxedo gleaming under the venue's crystal chandeliers, wearing that same cold smile I'd seen him use on vendors right before he crushed their businesses. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. These weren't just random employees gawking at my public execution. These were our biggest clients, board members, and investors, the people who collectively represented over $300 million in annual revenue for Pinnacle Financial Solutions. The kind of people who could make or break not just careers, but entire companies with a single phone call. "Jason, what are you talking about?" My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I'd been enjoying conversations with clients just moments before, discussing the new tax optimization strategies I'd developed that had saved our top accounts over $12 million this quarter alone. "What I'm talking about is deadweight," he gestured dismissively in my direction, his voice carrying through the premium sound system. "These people pay us to protect their assets with the highest level of expertise. They deserve better than mediocre contributions from someone who's clearly reached her ceiling." Mrs. Chen from the tech manufacturing giant shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Patel from the international shipping conglomerate suddenly found his dessert plate fascinating. I'd worked directly with both of them for years, often taking midnight calls to solve complex financial structures that Jason had never even bothered to understand. "I think there must be some mistake," I started, trying to maintain composure. "No mistake at all." Jason's voice grew louder, more theatrical. He was performing now, I realized with sickening clarity. Showing off his power. I'd been carrying the financial strategy division for too long, making excuses for subpar work. Our clients deserve to see that we're serious about excellence. The woman from the pharmaceutical company whose entire international tax structure I'd redesigned last quarter wouldn't meet my eyes. The real estate mogul whose offshore account system I'd optimized from scratch just stared at his hands. "The truth is," Jason continued, his voice filling the elegant ballroom, "Sarah's been coasting, taking credit for team efforts, contributing maybe 15% while the rest of us pick up the slack. These high net worth individuals are trusting us with their financial futures, and they deserve transparency about who's actually delivering results." My hands were steady but my mind was racing. Taking credit for team efforts? I'd personally worked 70-hour weeks for the past 2 years. I'd solved Westridge Corporation's tax liability problem that Jason couldn't figure out after trying for 9 months. I designed the algorithm that restructured Johnson Family Office's entire portfolio, saving them $2.3 million annually. "I need you to leave the premises immediately." Jason's tone had shifted to administrative, like he was discussing the catering menu. "Security will escort you out. Your final compensation will be processed according to company policy." Before I dive deeper, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you're listening from? I want to know where my story is reaching. And please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification because this story is going places none of us expected. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I want you to understand something about the moment I'm describing. This wasn't just professional humiliation. This was the complete destruction of 5 years of my life in front of people who had trusted me with their most sensitive financial information. Jason had just painted me as incompetent in front of clients who had specifically requested me for their accounts. But here's what made it truly devastating. I genuinely believed Jason was a decent person beneath his cutthroat exterior. I respected his business acumen. I'd even covered for him countless times when clients called with questions about financial structures he couldn't explain. "There's no need for security," I managed to say. "I can find my own way out." "Actually, company policy requires." "Let her go, Jason." Mrs. Chen's voice cut through his response. "She's been nothing but professional with our accounts." Jason's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Fine. Sarah, your access credentials will be deactivated within the hour." I gathered my small clutch purse and the portfolio I'd brought to showcase our newest tax strategies to potential clients. My hands moved automatically while my brain tried to process what had just happened. 5 years of building trust, solving impossible financial puzzles, working weekends to meet tax deadlines, all erased in 3 minutes. As I reached the ballroom entrance, I heard Jason's voice resume its confident cadence. "Now, let's talk about the real innovations we've been developing at Pinnacle." I didn't look back. The elevator ride to the hotel lobby felt eternal. My reflection in the polished brass doors showed a woman who looked exactly like me but somehow different, like something fundamental had shifted and I hadn't caught up yet. My car was with the valet service, the same luxury perk Jason insisted on for all executive-level employees to impress clients. I remembered how many times he'd emphasized appearances. Perception is reality in financial services, Sarah. We need to look successful to be successful. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I sat in my car for nearly 30 minutes just staring at the steering wheel. My phone buzzed with text messages, probably colleagues who'd witnessed the spectacle. I didn't check them. Instead, I found myself thinking about something completely unrelated. 2 years ago, during a rare moment of vulnerability at a company retreat, Jason had mentioned an investigation by the Internal Revenue Service. His family's private investment vehicle had been flagged for potential irregularities. He'd seemed genuinely distressed, not his usual confident self. "They're looking at transactions from 3 years ago," he'd confided after several glasses of scotch. "If they find what they're looking for, the penalties would be in the millions. Criminal charges would be on the table." He'd mentioned specific transactions, moving assets through a series of shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and Singapore. Complex structures designed to conceal the true ownership and avoid taxation. Not the legal kind of tax avoidance we helped clients with, but actual criminal tax evasion. "The documents that would prove everything are scattered across multiple jurisdictions," he'd said, loosening his tie as he spoke. "The IRS would need a team of forensic accountants working for months to piece it all together. But if someone knew exactly where to look..." He'd trailed off, seemingly realizing he'd said too much. I'd spent that weekend researching financial crimes out of professional curiosity. Not because Jason had asked, he hadn't, but because I couldn't stop thinking about the technical challenge. How would someone structure transactions to avoid detection? What were the weak points in such a system? The Archer-Daniels method of financial obscuration was exactly the kind of approach Jason had described. Named after 2 financial criminals from the 1980s, it involved creating a deliberately confusing web of transactions across multiple tax jurisdictions, with each entity holding just enough legitimate business to appear valid under cursory examination. I'd called a former colleague who specialized in financial forensics. Hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to track transactions through an Archer-Daniels structure, what would be the most efficient approach? I'd asked. "The Panama Connection." She'd replied without hesitation. "Every Archer-Daniels setup needs a clearing point, and 90% of the time it runs through one of 3 banks in Panama. Find that connection, and you can unravel the entire structure." Over the next month, I developed a specialized algorithm designed to identify the hallmarks of Archer-Daniels structures and trace the money flow to its Panama clearing point. I'd called it Project Lighthouse, a system to illuminate what was deliberately hidden in the financial darkness. It took 6 weeks to build the model, working nights and weekends. When finished, I'd saved it to an encrypted drive and stored it away. I told myself it was an intellectual exercise, a way to better understand financial crimes so I could better protect our legitimate clients. But the truth was simpler. I'd built a tool that could potentially expose Jason Reynolds' financial crimes if they existed as he described. Not because I planned to use it, but because it felt like an insurance policy. Knowledge that might someday be valuable. For 2 years, I'd made quarterly updates to that algorithm, refining its ability to detect and trace complex financial structures. Jason had no idea it existed. He'd continued building his reputation as a financial genius, while I'd continued improving a tool that could potentially destroy everything he'd built. Now, sitting in my car after being professionally executed by the same man, I realized something that made my stomach drop. Jason Reynolds had spent 5 years taking credit for work he didn't do, while I'd spent 2 years perfecting a system that could expose his biggest secret. I drove home to my condo, a comfortable 2-bedroom place about 20 minutes from the office. I'd chosen it primarily for the home office space where I could work late into the night on complex client problems. My condo was quiet in that peculiar way that follows catastrophic news. Even ordinary sounds, the refrigerator humming, neighbors in the hallway, seemed muffled and distant, as if reality itself was being filtered through shock. I made tea and sat at my dining table with my laptop. 5 years of client relationships, financial models, tax strategies, all of it now property of a company that had just discarded me like outdated software. But I still had access to my personal accounts and files, including Project Lighthouse. My phone buzzed with another text message. This time I looked. It was from Miguel Santos, one of my colleagues. "Sarah, what the hell happened? Jason just sent a company-wide email saying you decided to pursue other opportunities. Everyone knows that's not what happened." Then another from Jennifer Wu, "Just heard about the holiday party. This is insane. You literally built our entire international tax strategy division from scratch. And another from David Thompson, Jason is telling people you'd been struggling for months and that letting you go was a difficult but necessary decision. Nobody's buying it. So he was already rewriting history, creating a narrative where he was the thoughtful leader making tough choices rather than a man who destroyed someone's career as holiday entertainment. I set my phone aside and opened my personal cloud storage. Project Lighthouse sat in an encrypted folder, regularly updated but never deployed. I stared at the file name for a long time. This wasn't about revenge. This was about something much simpler and much more devastating. Jason Reynolds was about to discover exactly who he really was when the protective shield I'd built, a shield he'd never even known existed, suddenly disappeared. He'd learned that his financial security, his reputation, his very freedom had all been protected by the technical expertise of someone whose professional worth he'd just publicly demolished. The cruelest part wasn't that I was planning to hurt him. The cruelest part was that I was simply going to stop protecting him from his own actions, and that would be enough to reveal the truth about everything he'd built his life on. I opened Project Lighthouse and examined the interface I designed. It was streamlined and elegant. Input the target name and known business entities, and the algorithm would search for the telltale patterns of an Archer-Daniels structure across global financial databases. I entered Jason Reynolds and the names of his 3 primary investment vehicles. Then I added Pinnacle Financial Solutions as a related entity. The program began its work, scanning thousands of transactions across dozens of jurisdictions. This would take hours. I closed my laptop and tried to sleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely calm. Not happy. What had happened was still devastating, but there was a clarity I hadn't expected. Like when you finally understand a puzzle that's been confusing you for months. I made breakfast and checked my personal messages. 9 missed calls from Jason's personal line. 17 text messages from colleagues. For voicemails I wasn't ready to hear yet. But the most interesting message was from Mrs. Chen, the manufacturing client from yesterday's disaster. She'd somehow obtained my personal contact information. Sarah, this is Victoria Chen from last night's event. I wanted to reach out personally because what happened was completely inappropriate. Several of us clients have been discussing this, and we're deeply concerned. Jason's behavior was unprofessional and frankly contradicts everything we've experienced working with you. Please call me when you have a moment. I saved the message and kept scrolling. Similar messages from 5 other clients, all expressing confusion, concern, and something that sounded suspiciously like doubt about Jason's version of events. Around noon, I checked Project Lighthouse. The algorithm had completed its initial scan and identified a potential Archer-Daniels structure with 87% confidence. The visualization showed a complex web of entities spanning 7 countries, with a central clearing point through Second National Bank of Panama, exactly as my former colleague had predicted. The transactions totaled $14.7 million moved through this structure over the past 6 years, with an estimated tax avoidance of $4.2 million. The model indicated criminal liability with 93% confidence. Just as I was examining these results, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Sarah? This is Robert Wilson from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm calling about a rather unusual situation. We received an anonymous tip regarding potential financial improprieties at Pinnacle Financial Solutions, specifically involving CEO Jason Reynolds. My heart rate picked up. I see. The information was remarkably detailed: transaction records, entity structures, bank account numbers. Normally we'd spend months verifying such information, but in this case, the documentation was so comprehensive that we've already opened a formal investigation. I hadn't sent anything to the SEC. I'd only run the analysis program last night, and it had only just finished its work. I'm calling because your name was mentioned in the tip as someone who might have relevant information. The sender suggested you were recently terminated from Pinnacle and might be willing to assist our investigation. Someone else had been tracking Jason's financial crimes? Someone who knew about my firing less than 24 hours after it happened? Mr. Wilson, I'm afraid I'm a bit confused. I was indeed let go from Pinnacle yesterday, but I haven't sent any information to the SEC. Interesting, Wilson replied. The tip came from someone using the name Project Lighthouse. Does that mean anything to you? A chill ran down my spine. That was impossible. No one knew about Project Lighthouse. I'd never shared it with anyone. I'm familiar with the term, I said carefully. It's a financial forensics concept. Well, Ms. Mitchell, regardless of the source, we'd like to speak with you about your knowledge of Pinnacle's operations. Would you be available to come to our offices tomorrow morning? After I hung up, I sat staring at my laptop. How could someone have known about Project Lighthouse? How could they have gathered the same information my algorithm was designed to collect and send it to the SEC the very night I was fired? Unless Jason's financial crimes were much more widely known than I'd realized. Unless I wasn't the only one who'd been protecting him, intentionally or otherwise. That afternoon, I decided to visit the coffee shop across from Pinnacle's offices. Not to spy, exactly, but because I needed to normalize being in that area if I was going to rebuild my career. I couldn't spend the rest of my life avoiding downtown. I was reading on my tablet when I saw Jason burst through the office building's entrance. Even from across the street, I could see his agitation. He was on his phone, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, gesturing wildly with his free hand. 20 minutes later, he went back inside, only to emerge again 15 minutes. After that, more pacing, more frantic gesturing. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. Sarah Mitchell. It was Jason's voice, sounding strained, almost desperate, completely different from the confident authority he displayed yesterday. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Jason. Please, something's happened with the SEC. They're saying they have detailed records of transactions that don't exist, accounts I've never heard of. I know yesterday was. I know I handled things poorly, but this is about my freedom, Sarah. They're talking about criminal charges. I waited. Sarah, the SEC investigator mentioned something called Project Lighthouse. They said it was the source of the information. I don't understand what that means or how it's possible. The silence stretched between us. Across the street, I could see him standing outside the office building, looking smaller somehow than he had yesterday. I need to go, Jason. Wait, please. If you know something about this, if there's been some kind of mistake. The SEC is saying I could face up to 20 years. They're freezing accounts. The board is calling an emergency meeting. My whole life is falling apart in less than 24 hours. I hope you figure it out. I hung up. Within an hour, I had 8 more missed calls from him. Then text messages started arriving. Sarah, please call me back. The SEC investigators are going through everything. They're saying they have access to accounts I didn't even know existed. The board is demanding answers I don't have. Please. If you know something about Project Lighthouse, I need your help. They're saying there's evidence of $14.7 million in tax evasion. That's exactly the amount I mentioned to you at the retreat 2 years ago. This can't be a coincidence. I turned off my phone. The next day, I met Victoria Chen for coffee. She'd insisted on the meeting, and honestly, I was curious about the client perspective on everything that had happened. Before we discuss anything else, she said as soon as we sat down, I want you to know that several of us have been in contact with Pinnacle's board of directors. What happened at that holiday party was completely unacceptable. I appreciate that, but I don't want to cause more problems. Sarah, you're not causing problems. You solved our international tax structure crisis last quarter. Jason took credit for that solution in the follow-up reports, but we know who actually did the work. We know who stayed on conference calls until 3 a.m. with our Singapore office. We know who built the models that saved us $3.2 million this year. She leaned forward. Jason has been presenting your work as his own for years. We've been uncomfortable about it, but we assumed it was normal team collaboration. That holiday party performance made us realize something much more troubling was going on. What do you mean? We started comparing notes. The Westridge tax liability solution that Jason presented as his innovation? Their CFO told us you designed and implemented the entire structure. The Johnson family office portfolio restructuring that won Jason that industry award? Their director said you were the only consultant who understood their complex family trust requirements. My coffee had grown cold, but I kept holding the cup anyway. We're not just upset about how he treated you, Victoria continued. We're upset about being deceived. We've been paying premium consulting rates under the impression that Jason was the financial genius behind these solutions. Now we're discovering that the actual innovator was being treated as disposable support staff. So what happens now? Pinnacle's board has called emergency meetings with all the affected clients. We're being asked to clarify exactly who we've been working with and who's been delivering results. Several companies are considering moving their accounts to firms where they can work directly with the people actually solving their problems. I thought about Jason, probably frantically trying to maintain client relationships while simultaneously trying to deal with an SEC investigation targeting crimes he thought were perfectly hidden. There's something else, Victoria said. This morning, the news broke that Jason is under investigation for tax evasion. The SEC has frozen Pinnacle's accounts pending a full review. The stock is down 30% already. That must be creating chaos at the firm. Chaos doesn't begin to describe it. The board is in continuous emergency sessions. There are rumors that Jason may be removed as CEO by the end of the week. That evening, I turned my phone back on. 23 missed calls from Jason. The text messages had evolved from confusion to panic to something approaching desperation. Sarah, I've been thinking about our last conversation, and I think I understand what happened. If you know something about these financial transactions, I need to know. This isn't about pride anymore. The SEC says they have transaction records going back 6 years. They're saying the evidence was compiled by something called Project Lighthouse. The name can't be a coincidence. Please, I know I made a terrible mistake at the holiday party. I was trying to impress the clients and chose the wrong way to do it. But I don't deserve to spend 20 years in prison because of one poor judgment call. I'll do anything to make this right. Publicly apologize, recommend you to other firms, provide references, just please tell me how to fix this. The last message was just 3 words, it was you. I called him back. Sarah. He answered on the first ring. Thank you for calling. I've been trying to figure this out for 2 days, and there's only one explanation that makes sense. You reported me to the SEC, why would I do that? I don't know, that's what I can't understand. Revenge for the firing? We barely knew each other personally. I never thought you'd go this far. But he had gone further, deliberately destroying my professional reputation in front of dozens of industry leaders. Jason, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Anything. At the holiday party, when you fired me in front of those clients, did you believe what you were saying about my work? Long pause. I was trying to demonstrate leadership, show them that we maintain high standards. That's not what I asked. Did you believe I was deadweight? Did you believe I'd been coasting and taking credit for other people's work? Another pause, longer this time. No, he said quietly. No, I didn't believe that. So you destroyed my reputation and my career using lies you knew were false, in front of people whose respect I'd spent 5 years earning? Yes. While I was quietly protecting you from the consequences of your own financial crimes? Crimes you didn't even know I knew about? Yes. And now you want me to continue that protection after you've proven you don't deserve it? The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. I don't know how to fix this, he finally said. I don't know how to undo what I did or how to deserve forgiveness. I know I don't have any right to ask for help. I just know that my life is being destroyed because of my choices, and I can't bear it. Jason, I didn't report you to the SEC, what? But Project Lighthouse, the exact amount I mentioned to you. I created Project Lighthouse 2 years ago after you told me about the IRS investigation. It's an algorithm designed to trace Archer Daniels' financial structures. I ran it last night out of curiosity, and it confirmed everything you told me. But I never sent that information to anyone. He didn't answer. You spent 5 years building your reputation on work you didn't do, while someone else quietly protected you from the consequences of your own criminal behavior. And when you finally felt secure enough to show your true character, you chose cruelty. Sarah, I'm not angry, Jason. I'm disappointed. I genuinely respected your business acumen. I thought you were someone worth protecting. At that holiday party, you proved that my discretion was wasted on someone who didn't deserve it. I hung up. 2 weeks later, Victoria Chin called with an update. Jason had been removed as CEO pending the outcome of the SEC investigation. Several major clients had requested to work exclusively with other team members going forward. Pinnacle was restructuring to ensure more direct client access to the actual financial experts. What about the SEC investigation? I asked. I heard. It's expanding. They found connections to other financial crimes beyond the tax evasion. Someone named Wilson from the SEC mentioned they received additional information from a source called Project Lighthouse just yesterday, transaction records they hadn't previously discovered. That was impossible. I hadn't sent anything to the SEC, and I was the only person with access to Project Lighthouse. Unless someone else had built their own version of the same tool. Someone else who had been watching Jason's financial crimes unfold and chosen to act at precisely the moment when Jason showed his true character. 3 months later, I started my own financial consulting practice. 4 of Pinnacle's former clients became my first accounts, specifically requesting the expertise they'd been told was someone else's all along. I never reported anyone to the SEC. Not because I'd lost faith in justice, but because I'd learned that true accountability sometimes arrives through unexpected channels. Jason taught me that some people will take your best intentions and use them as stepping stones to elevate themselves while diminishing you. He showed me that my expertise was valuable enough to be more selective about how I shared it. But he also taught me something else. The most devastating consequence isn't what happens to someone who wrongs you, it's simply withdrawing the protection they never earned, and letting them discover who they really are without your invisible help. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever given more than you received or supported someone who didn't value your contribution, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Share your own experiences with workplace betrayal or professional undervaluation, and subscribe for more real stories about the complicated ways people reveal their true character when they think no one important is watching. Your support means everything to someone rebuilding after learning that not everyone deserves the best parts of who you are. 3 months after being fired at the holiday party, I found myself sitting across from Robert Wilson of the SEC in a sleek conference room, overlooking the city skyline. The walls were lined with awards and commendations celebrating the agency's biggest financial crime busts. Soon, Jason Reynolds' case would likely join that wall of shame. "Thank you for coming in again, Ms. Mitchell," Wilson said, sliding a folder across the polished table. "We've made significant progress in the Reynolds investigation, and I wanted to update you personally." I opened the folder to find a complex diagram mapping out financial connections across 3 continents, a perfect visualization of the Archer-Daniels structure I discovered in Project Lighthouse. "We've traced over $22 million in tax evasion at this point," Wilson continued. "The evidence is overwhelming. Reynolds will be facing multiple felony charges. The question that remains is who else at Pinnacle was involved." "And you still don't know who sent you the original tip?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Wilson shook his head. "The source has remained completely anonymous. They only communicate through encrypted channels, always signing off as Project Lighthouse. But whoever they are, they seem to have intimate knowledge of Reynolds' operations." I studied the diagram, noting how closely it matched my own algorithm's findings. Someone else had been watching Jason just as carefully as I had, but unlike me, they'd chosen to act immediately when he revealed his true character. "We've received 4 separate data packages from this source," Wilson continued. "Each one more detailed than the last. The latest included offshore accounts we hadn't even begun to investigate yet." I nodded, wondering who else had built their own version of Project Lighthouse. Who else had been quietly tracking Jason's financial crimes while waiting for the right moment to expose him? "Ms. Mitchell, I have to ask again, given your position at Pinnacle, did you have any knowledge of these activities while you were employed there?" I considered my answer carefully. I had suspicions about certain financial structures. In my role, I occasionally saw patterns that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify. But I never had concrete evidence of criminal activity. This wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. I'd suspected based on Jason's own drunken confession, but I'd never accessed actual company records to confirm those suspicions. Project Lighthouse had been built on hypothetical models, not stolen data. Well, whoever Project Lighthouse is, they provided enough evidence to put Reynolds away for a very long time. Wilson closed his folder. "The board at Pinnacle is cooperating fully, trying to save what's left of the company's reputation." As I left the SEC offices, my phone buzzed with a text message from Victoria Chen. "Lunch tomorrow? Big news to discuss." I responded immediately to confirm. Victoria had become not just a client but something of a mentor in the months since the holiday party disaster. She'd been instrumental in helping me establish my new consulting practice, even introducing me to several potential clients in her network. The next day, we met at a quiet restaurant near her office. Victoria arrived looking more energized than I'd seen her in weeks. "You're not going to believe this," she said as soon as we were seated. "Pinnacle just announced they're shutting down the entire international division. They're trying to rebrand as a domestic-only firm focused on transparency and compliance." "That's almost half their business," I said, genuinely surprised. Pinnacle had built its reputation on helping multinational corporations navigate complex international tax structures. Without that division, they'd be a shadow of their former selves. Exactly. They're basically admitting they can't be trusted with international finance anymore. The board is desperate to distance themselves from anything that might connect to Reynolds' schemes. Victoria smiled. "But that's not the big news. 3 of their biggest international clients reached out to me this morning, asking if I knew whether you'd be willing to take them on at your new firm." My heart raced. These would be million-dollar accounts, the kind that could establish my new practice as a serious player in the financial consulting world overnight. "That's incredible," I managed. "But I'm a one-person operation right now. I couldn't possibly handle accounts that size without a team." Victoria's smile widened. "That's the other part of what I wanted to discuss. What would you think about a partnership? I've been considering leaving Chin Manufacturing to start my own consulting practice for years. This might be the perfect opportunity for both of us." The proposition was unexpected but intriguing. Victoria Chen was a legend in financial circles. An experienced CFO with connections throughout the industry. A partnership with her would instantly legitimize my fledgling practice. You're serious? I asked, still processing the suggestion. Completely serious. I've seen your work up close for years, Sarah. You're brilliant at what you do, and I'm tired of watching people like Reynolds take credit for the work of people like you. Together, we could build something that values actual expertise rather than just appearances. By the time lunch ended, we had the outline of a business plan for Pinnacle Financial Strategies. Victoria would bring her industry connections and executive experience, while I would bring my technical expertise and innovative approaches. We'd start with the 3 former Pinnacle clients and build from there. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang with an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, half expecting Jason's desperate voice again. Sarah Mitchell? The voice was unfamiliar, female, measured, professional. Yes, this is Sarah. My name is Diana Ortiz. I'm the new interim CEO at Pinnacle Financial Solutions. I was hoping we might be able to meet. I stopped walking. I'm not sure what we would have to discuss, Ms. Ortiz. Quite a lot, actually. I've spent the past 2 weeks reviewing client files, and your name keeps appearing in all our most successful projects. Yet officially, you were just a senior analyst while Jason Reynolds was credited with the strategic direction. I'm trying to understand what actually happened at this company before I arrived. I remained silent, unsure how to respond. Ms. Mitchell, I'm trying to save what's left of Pinnacle. We've lost over 40% of our market value since the SEC investigation became public. Half our executive team is facing potential criminal charges for their knowledge of Reynolds' schemes. I need to understand what was real and what was fabrication. In this company's success stories, I'm not sure I can help you, I said carefully. My experience at Pinnacle ended rather abruptly, as I'm sure you've heard. Yes, at the holiday party. That incident has become something of a legend around here. She paused. What if I told you the board is prepared to offer you a significant settlement for the wrongful termination and public humiliation? Along with a formal apology? Now she had my attention. I'd say I'm listening. $1 million, full confidentiality on both sides, and a public statement acknowledging your contributions to the company's major successes over the past 5 years. All we ask is that you meet with me to help untangle which projects were actually viable and which were potentially compromised by Reynolds' activities. It was a generous offer, more than generous. But something felt off about it. Why me specifically? Surely there are other analysts who could help you understand the project structures. Diana sighed. Because you're the only one who seems to have actually understood what was happening. And frankly, because of Project Lighthouse. My blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. The SEC has been quite open about their anonymous source. Whoever built Project Lighthouse understood Reynolds' financial structures better than anyone. Most of our analysts are still struggling to comprehend the evidence the SEC has presented. You're the only one who might be able to help us separate legitimate business from criminal activity quickly enough to save what's left of the company. Ms. Ortiz, I really don't. We can make it $2 million if that would help your memory. She interrupted. The board is desperate, Ms. Mitchell. Pinnacle is imploding. We need someone who actually understands what's real and what's not in our business model. I thought about it for a moment. The money would certainly accelerate my new partnership with Victoria, allowing us to hire staff immediately rather than growing slowly. And helping Pinnacle separate legitimate business from Jason's criminal activities wasn't unethical. It might even help preserve jobs for former colleagues who had nothing to do with his schemes. I'll consider meeting with you, I said finally. But I make no promises about what insights I can provide. That's all I'm asking. My assistant will contact you to arrange the details. That evening, as I was reviewing the draft partnership agreement Victoria had sent over, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was already past 8. When I checked the security camera, I was shocked to see Jason Reynolds standing outside my door. He looked terrible, unshaven, his normally immaculate suit wrinkled, his posture defeated. Nothing like the confident, borderline arrogant CEO who had fired me 3 months ago. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Sarah. His voice was hoarse. Thank you for not calling security immediately. What are you doing here, Jason? I needed to talk to you. Face to face. He looked up and down the hallway nervously. Can I come in? Just for a few minutes. I think I'm being followed. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but curiosity won out. I stepped aside to let him enter, then closed the door behind him. Make it quick, I said, keeping a safe distance. I have work to do. Jason ran a hand through his disheveled hair. They've frozen everything. All my accounts, properties, even my retirement funds. The board voted unanimously to remove me as CEO. My wife has filed for divorce. My attorney says I'm looking at a minimum of 15 years if convicted on all counts. And you came here for, what? Sympathy? I came to understand, he said, his eyes meeting mine directly for the first time. I need to know if it was you. If you were Project Lighthouse all along. I considered lying, but what was the point? I created an algorithm called Project Lighthouse after you mentioned your IRS troubles 2 years ago. It was designed to trace Archer Daniels' financial structures. But I never sent anything to the SEC, but the timing, he insisted. The SEC received their first tip the night after the holiday party. The exact night you ran your algorithm. That wasn't me, Jason. Someone else has been watching you too. He collapsed onto my couch, putting his head in his hands. Who else would have known? Who else would have had that information and that timing? I've been asking myself the same question, I admitted. Someone else built their own version of Project Lighthouse. Someone else was tracking your financial crimes. And unlike me, they decided to act as soon as you showed your true character at that holiday party. Jason looked up, his face pale. You think someone at Pinnacle? It would have to be someone with access to financial data. Someone who understood complex tax structures. Someone who was watching both you and me. A look of realization crossed his face. Elena Rodriguez. In compliance. She was always asking questions about the international structures. I thought she was just being thorough. Or Michael Chen in risk management, I suggested. He had concerns about some of the offshore accounts last year. Jason shook his head slowly. It doesn't matter anymore, does it? Whoever it was, they've destroyed everything I built. No, Jason, I said firmly. You destroyed everything you built. Project Lighthouse, whether mine or someone else's, just exposed what was already there. You were committing financial crimes for years. You took credit for other people's work. You publicly humiliated me to boost your own ego. These were all your choices. He was quiet for a long moment. I keep thinking about that holiday party. Why did I do it? Why did I feel the need to tear you down in front of everyone? You were one of the few people at Pinnacle who actually deserved their position. Only you can answer that question, I said, feeling oddly detached from the broken man sitting in my living room. I think I was afraid, he said finally. Afraid that people would figure out that you were the real talent. Afraid that if I didn't control the narrative, someone would realize I was a fraud. Not just with the tax evasion, but with everything. Most of the innovations we sold to clients were yours, not mine. I said nothing, letting him continue his belated moment of self-awareness. The sick part is, I actually respected your work. I knew how brilliant you were. That's why I kept you in that senior analyst position instead of promoting you. I needed your expertise without giving you the platform to outshine me. He laughed bitterly. And then I fired you anyway, because I couldn't stand watching clients direct their questions to you instead of me during presentations. That's actually the most honest thing you've ever said to me, Jason. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just because everything fell apart, but because what I did was wrong. You deserved better. Yes, I did. I moved toward the door. And now I need you to leave. He stood slowly. There's one more thing you should know. Diana Ortiz has been contacting former Pinnacle executives, offering settlements in exchange for information about Project Lighthouse. The board is convinced that if they can identify the whistleblower, they can somehow salvage the company's reputation. That explained Diana's generous offer and specific interest in me. They didn't just want my help understanding legitimate business operations, they wanted to confirm I was the whistleblower and silence me with a settlement. Thank you for the warning, I said, opening the door. Good luck with your trial, Jason. After he left, I immediately called Victoria to warn her about Pinnacle's tactics. We agreed to proceed with our partnership plans but to stay completely clear of any entanglements with my former employer. The next morning, I woke to breaking news. Jason Reynolds had been found dead in his apartment, an apparent suicide. A note had been discovered, confessing to all the financial crimes and explicitly stating that no one else at Pinnacle had been aware of his activities. I sat in shocked silence, staring at the news report on my phone. Despite everything, I had never wished for this outcome. My phone rang. Robert Wilson from the SEC. Ms. Mitchell, I assume you've seen the news about Reynolds, he said without preamble. Yes, just now. It's shocking. Indeed. What's even more shocking is that we received one final communication from Project Lighthouse about an hour before Reynolds' time of death. It contained comprehensive evidence clearing every other executive at Pinnacle of involvement in the tax evasion scheme. The evidence shows Reynolds acted alone. I frowned. Is that possible? For him to have managed all of that without help? According to the documentation we received, yes. It's remarkably thorough: transaction records, communication logs, even security footage showing Reynolds accessing systems after hours. If this evidence is accurate, he was the sole architect of the entire scheme. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, trying to process everything. Jason had taken the ultimate escape route, and somehow Project Lighthouse had provided evidence clearing everyone else at Pinnacle just before his death. It was too perfect, too convenient. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Some lighthouses are meant to guide ships safely to harbor. Others are meant to warn them away from dangerous shores. Yours was the former. Mine was the latter. We both served our purpose. I stared at the cryptic message, realization dawning. Someone else had indeed built their own version of Project Lighthouse, but with a different purpose than mine. Not to protect, but to expose. Not to guide, but to warn. And now they had completed their mission, leaving Pinnacle to rebuild without the taint of company-wide corruption. Leaving the remaining executives free to start over. Leaving me free to build something new with Victoria Chen, unencumbered by ongoing investigations or litigation. 6 months later, Pinnacle Financial Strategies had offices in 3 cities and a client list that included former Pinnacle accounts as well as new corporations drawn to our reputation for ethical financial innovation. Victoria and I had built a culture that valued expertise over ego, substance over appearance. I never discovered the identity of the other Project Lighthouse creator, though I had my suspicions. Elena Rodriguez had left Pinnacle shortly after Jason's death to start her own compliance consulting firm. Michael Chen had accepted a position with the Treasury Department focusing on financial crimes. Either of them, or someone else entirely, had watched Jason's behavior for years, built their own system to track his crimes, and waited for the perfect moment to act. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I had used my knowledge to quietly protect Jason from himself, someone else had used similar knowledge to ensure he faced justice. 2 lighthouses with different purposes, illuminating the same troubled waters. The most important lesson I learned through all of this wasn't about finance or corporate politics. It was about the power of expertise wielded with purpose. Jason had spent years taking credit for work he didn't understand, building his reputation on other people's talents while hiding his own inadequacies behind financial crimes. In the end, it was expertise, both mine and my unknown counterparts, that revealed the truth. Not through confrontation or accusation, but simply by illuminating what had always been there, hidden in the darkness. If you've ever had your work appropriated by someone else, if you've ever been undervalued while watching others take credit for your contributions, remember this: true expertise cannot remain hidden forever. The light always finds a way to shine through. The greatest revenge against those who diminish you isn't fighting back directly, it's continuing to develop your skills until they become impossible to ignore. It's building something of your own that reflects your true value. It's creating a lighthouse that guides others safely to shore, even as it warns them away from dangerous waters. If this story has resonated with you, please hit that like button. And subscribe to hear more authentic stories about navigating professional challenges with integrity. Share your own experiences in the comments, I read every single one. Your support means everything as I continue building a career based on actual value rather than appearances. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do isn't fighting against those who wrong us, it's simply continuing to shine our light, illuminating the path for others while revealing the truth that was always there. 1 year after Jason Reynolds' death, I found myself standing at a podium in front of 300 financial professionals at the annual Ethics in Finance Summit. The irony wasn't lost on me. A year ago, I'd been publicly fired at a holiday party. Now I was delivering the keynote address at the industry's most prestigious gathering. Financial expertise without ethical foundation is not just worthless. It's dangerous, I said, looking out at the sea of attentive faces. What happened at Pinnacle Financial Solutions wasn't just about one man's criminal behavior. It was about a culture that valued perception over substance, that rewarded taking credit over creating value. From my position on stage, I could see Victoria Chen sitting in the front row, nodding encouragingly. Our partnership had flourished beyond either of our expectations. Pinnacle Financial Strategies now employed 28 professionals across 4 offices. We'd been featured in Financial Times as the firm rebuilding trust in financial consulting. The question we should all be asking isn't just how to prevent the next financial crime, I continued. It's how to build organizations where expertise is recognized and rewarded, where ethical behavior is the expectation rather than the exception. As I spoke, I noticed a woman in the 3rd row watching me with particular intensity. She seemed vaguely familiar, though I couldn't immediately place her. Dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, wire-rimmed glasses, taking no notes unlike those around her. When we talk about whistleblowers like Project Lighthouse, we often focus on their role in exposing wrongdoing, I said, moving to my final point. But I think there's a deeper lesson there. In a healthy organization, that expertise would have been channeled into innovation rather than investigation. That brilliance would have created value rather than uncovering theft. After my speech concluded and the applause faded, I made my way through the crowd of well-wishers and potential clients. Victoria was already networking, her natural charisma drawing people to her like moths to flame. "Impressive speech," said a voice behind me. I turned to find the dark-haired woman with the intense gaze. Up close, I recognized her, Elena Rodriguez, formerly of Pinnacle's compliance department. "Thank you," I replied, studying her more carefully now. "I believe we worked together at Pinnacle, though we rarely crossed paths directly." "Different departments, different floors," she agreed with a small smile. "But I always admired your work from afar. You had a reputation for understanding structures that confused everyone else." There was something in her tone, a hint of shared knowledge that made me wonder. Could she have been the other lighthouse keeper? The one who exposed Jason's crimes, while I merely documented them? "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "Your work in compliance was equally impressive. I imagine it must have been challenging during recent events." Her smile remained unchanged. "Compliance is always challenging when those at the top don't want to comply. But eventually, the truth finds its way to the surface." Before I could respond, she handed me a business card. "My new consulting firm specializes in financial transparency systems. Perhaps our companies could collaborate sometime. I think we might have complementary approaches." The card read Lighthouse Compliance Solutions, with Elena Rodriguez listed as founder and CEO. "Interesting name choice," I commented, meeting her gaze directly. "Some might call it on the nose," she admitted. "But I find transparency works best. The right people understand the meaning immediately." With that cryptic comment, she excused herself to speak with another attendee, leaving me to wonder if I'd just met the person who had brought down Jason Reynolds and saved Pinnacle from complete collapse. That evening, Victoria and I celebrated the successful conference presentation with dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the city. As we reviewed potential new client contacts, I mentioned my encounter with Elena Rodriguez. "Lighthouse Compliance Solutions," Victoria repeated thoughtfully. "That can't be a coincidence." "That's what I thought," I agreed. "But why reveal herself now? If she was the whistleblower, she's remained anonymous this long. Why risk exposure?" Victoria considered this while sipping her wine. "Maybe it's not about risk. Maybe it's about connection. Two people who witnessed the same corruption from different angles, who both created tools to address it in their own ways. That creates a bond, even if unspoken." "She suggested our firms might collaborate," I said, still uncertain how I felt about the possibility. "That could be interesting," Victoria replied. "Your expertise in creating financial solutions, her expertise in ensuring they remain compliant. It's actually a perfect partnership from a business perspective." I wasn't convinced. "There's something about it that feels complicated. If she was Project Lighthouse, she's the reason Jason is dead." Victoria put down her glass. "No, Sarah. Jason is the reason Jason is dead. He made choices, criminal choices, long before anyone exposed them. Elena, if it was her, simply revealed what was already there." "Like turning on a light in a dark room," I murmured. "Exactly. The cockroaches were always there, scurrying around in the darkness. The light didn't create them, it just made them visible." Later that night, I found myself unable to sleep, thinking about Elena Rodriguez and her cryptic comments. On impulse, I opened my laptop and navigated to her company website. Lighthouse Compliance Solutions had been founded 6 months after Jason's death. Their mission statement read, "Illuminating financial darkness through systematic transparency." Their client list already included 2 former Pinnacle accounts and several major banks. I was about to close the browser when I noticed a small symbol at the bottom of the page, a minimalist lighthouse design with binary code flowing from its beam. On a hunch, I selected the symbol and ran a simple decryption on the binary sequence. The decoded message was brief: "Some lighthouses guide, others warn. Both serve purpose." It was almost identical to the anonymous text I'd received after Jason's death. This was as close to a confession as I was likely to get. Elena Rodriguez had indeed been the other Project Lighthouse creator, the one who chose to expose rather than protect. The next morning, I received an email from Elena with a subject line that simply read, "Partnership Proposal." The message was professional and straightforward, outlining potential ways our firms could collaborate on client projects, combining Chan Mitchell's innovative financial strategies with Lighthouse Compliance's transparency systems. The business case was compelling. Our clients were increasingly asking for compliance guarantees alongside our tax strategies. Having a partner specializing in transparency systems would give us a competitive advantage while addressing a genuine market need. But something still felt unresolved. Before I could commit to a business relationship with Elena, I needed clarity about our shared past. I called her directly instead of replying to the email. "Sarah Mitchell," she answered immediately. "I was hoping you'd call." "Your proposal is interesting," I said, bypassing small talk. "But before we discuss a potential partnership, I need to understand something clearly." "Project Lighthouse," she stated, not a question but a confirmation. "Yes. Were you the whistleblower? Who sent information to the SEC?" A pause. "This isn't a conversation for phone lines. Can we meet somewhere private?" We agreed to meet at a small park near my office in an hour. When I arrived, Elena was already there, sitting on a bench overlooking a small pond, feeding breadcrumbs to ducks. "Financial crimes leave patterns," she said without preamble as I sat beside her. "Like ripples in water. Most people can't see them, but once you know what to look for, they're impossible to miss." "You built your own version of Project Lighthouse," I said. "It wasn't a question." She nodded. "I called it Watchtower. Same concept, different name. It was designed to identify potential compliance violations by tracing transaction patterns across jurisdictions. And you used it to track Jason's activities." "Among others," she confirmed. Pinnacle had several executives engaging in questionable practices. But Jason's patterns were by far the most extensive and deliberate. "Why didn't you report him earlier?" I asked, the question that had been bothering me for months. "If you had evidence of criminal behavior, why wait?" Elena threw another handful of breadcrumbs to the ducks before answering. "The same reason. You didn't, I suspect. Uncertainty about the consequences. Concern about collateral damage to innocent employees and clients. And perhaps a misplaced hope that the behavior would correct itself." "What changed?" I pressed. "Why report him immediately after the holiday party?" She turned to face me directly. "Because that night, I saw who Jason Reynolds truly was. Not just a financial criminal, but someone willing to destroy others to elevate himself. When he humiliated you publicly, someone whose work had created genuine value for clients, I realized he would never change. He would continue taking credit for others' expertise while engaging in criminal behavior that put the entire firm at risk." I absorbed this in silence, watching the ripples spread across the pond as ducks dove for the scattered breadcrumbs. "The timing must have seemed suspicious to you," Elena continued. "The SEC receiving evidence the same night you ran your algorithm." "I thought someone had hacked my system at first," I admitted. "The coincidence seemed impossible." "Not coincidence. Convergence." Elena smiled slightly. "Two people reaching the same conclusion at the same moment, through different paths. You ran your algorithm out of curiosity after being wronged. I submitted my evidence out of moral certainty after witnessing that wrong." "And the evidence? Clearing everyone else at Pinnacle? The final communication to the SEC before Jason's death?" Elena's expression remained neutral. "Jason Reynolds wasn't the only one with access to transaction records and communication logs. When it became clear he might implicate others to reduce his own sentence, someone needed to establish the truth conclusively. To protect innocent people, I suggested." "Precisely. What happened to you at that holiday party made something crystal clear: Jason Reynolds would sacrifice anyone to save himself. The evidence ensuring he couldn't take down innocent colleagues with him was a necessary precaution. Did you know he would—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Take his own life?" Elena shook her head. "No. That was his choice, his final escape from accountability. But I won't pretend to mourn the outcome. He destroyed careers, stole millions, and would have happily implicated innocent colleagues to reduce his own punishment." We sat in silence for a moment, each processing our shared history from these newly aligned perspectives. "Why reveal yourself now?" I finally asked. "Why suggest a partnership between our firms?" "Because expertise aligned with ethics is the most powerful force in finance," she said simply. "Your ability to create innovative financial structures combined with my ability to ensure their transparency and compliance, that's a partnership that could transform the industry." She had a point. Chen Mitchell excelled at creating sophisticated financial solutions for complex client needs. Lighthouse Compliance excelled at ensuring those solutions remain transparent and legally sound. Together, we could offer something truly unique in the market. "There's another reason," Elena added more quietly. "There are more Jason Reynolds out there, people using their positions to commit financial crimes while taking credit for others' expertise. Together, we could identify those patterns early, before they cause widespread damage." A preventative approach rather than reactive, I mused. Exactly. Illuminate the path forward while warning of dangerous shores. Both purposes of a lighthouse, working in harmony. 3 months later, Mitchell Rodriguez Financial Solutions launched as the industry's first fully integrated strategy and compliance firm. Our tagline, Illuminating Financial Pathways, was subtle enough for most, but unmistakable to those who knew our shared history. Victoria brought her executive expertise and industry connections. I brought my innovative financial structures and algorithms. Elena brought her compliance systems and transparency frameworks. Together, we created something none of us could have built alone. Our first major client was, ironically, Pinnacle Financial Solutions, now under completely new management and desperate to rebuild their reputation after the Reynolds scandal. They hired us to redesign their entire operational structure with transparency and compliance as foundational principles rather than afterthoughts. As we worked to transform their systems, I occasionally found myself in the same conference room where Jason had fired me 18 months earlier. The experience was surreal but also deeply affirming. I wasn't just back in that room, I was there as a respected expert leading the reconstruction of what Jason had nearly destroyed. One evening, as Victoria, Elena and I worked late finalizing the Pinnacle proposal, Elena raised a question that caught me off guard. "Do you ever regret not being the one to expose him?" she asked. "Not being the one to send evidence to the SEC?" I considered this carefully. No. That wasn't my path. My expertise was in building financial structures, not dismantling them. My version of Project Lighthouse was created to understand, not to expose. Yet you created it knowing what it might reveal, Victoria pointed out. Knowledge and action are different choices, I replied. I chose to know but not act. Elena chose both. Neither choice was wrong, they were simply different responses to the same corruption. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Different lighthouses, same troubled waters. What I do regret, I continued, is the years I spent enabling someone who didn't deserve it. The expertise I contributed without receiving appropriate credit. The way I allowed my contributions to be diminished and appropriated. That's why our partnership model matters so much, Victoria said. Every client proposal clearly identifies who contributed which elements. Every client knows exactly whose expertise they're paying for. No one's contributions get erased or diminished. It was true. Our firm had been deliberately structured to ensure recognition aligned with contribution. Junior analysts received credit for their work in client presentations. Compensation was tied directly to measurable value creation rather than hierarchical position. Transparency wasn't just something we sold to clients, it was how we operated internally. I think that's the real lesson from the Pinnacle collapse, Elena observed. Financial crimes are symptoms. The disease is a culture that values appearance over substance, that rewards taking credit over creating value. 2 years after that holiday party where Jason Reynolds destroyed my career, I found myself addressing our firm's annual client conference. Over 300 clients filled the auditorium, representing more than $500 billion in managed assets. Financial expertise without ethical foundation is not just worthless, it's dangerous, I began, echoing the speech that had first connected me with Elena. But ethics without expertise is equally ineffective. Together, they create something powerful, financial systems that serve their purpose while remaining true to fundamental principles. From the podium, I could see Victoria and Elena sitting side by side in the front row. 3 women with different skills, different perspectives, and different approaches, now united in a shared mission. The most valuable asset in finance isn't capital, I continued. It's integrity aligned with expertise. When we build systems that recognize and reward genuine contributions, that illuminate rather than obscure, we create sustainable value for everyone involved. As I spoke, I noticed several former Pinnacle executives in the audience, people who had survived the collapse and found new positions elsewhere. They'd seen firsthand what happens when finance loses its ethical moorings, when expertise is appropriated rather than honored. Some of you know parts of my story, I acknowledged toward the end of my address. How I was publicly fired by a CEO who was simultaneously taking credit for my work while engaging in financial crimes. How that moment of public humiliation ultimately led to the exposure of those crimes and the collapse of that firm. The room was completely silent now, every person focused on my words. What you might not know is that moment of crisis became my greatest opportunity. It freed me from contributing to a system that didn't value my expertise. It connected me with partners who shared my commitment to both innovation and integrity. It allowed me to build something genuine rather than continuing to prop up something false. I gestured to Victoria and Elena. None of us could have created this firm alone. It required Victoria's executive vision, my financial innovations, and Elena's compliance frameworks, all working in harmony, all recognized equally. As the applause washed over us at the conclusion of my speech, I felt a sense of completion that had been missing even during our firm's most successful moments. The journey from that holiday party humiliation to this professional triumph hadn't been about revenge or vindication. It had been about finding the right outlet for my expertise, the right partners for my vision, the right foundation for my work. Jason Reynolds had inadvertently given me a precious gift that night, the freedom to stop enabling someone who didn't deserve my support. The opportunity to build something authentic rather than continuing to contribute to something corrupt. If you've ever had your contributions diminished or appropriated, if you've ever found yourself enabling someone who doesn't appreciate your value, remember this: your expertise is too valuable to waste on those who won't acknowledge it. Your talents deserve a home where they're recognized and respected. The most powerful response to having your light diminished isn't fighting the darkness, it's finding a place where your light can shine unobstructed, where it joins with other lights to illuminate paths that were previously hidden. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more authentic explorations of professional challenges and ethical choices. Share your own experiences in the comments. I read every single one and draw inspiration from your stories. Your support means everything as I continue sharing lessons learned through difficult professional journeys. Sometimes the most devastating setbacks become our greatest opportunities, not because of some mystical cosmic justice, but because they free us to build something better than what we've lost. The next time someone tries to diminish your contributions or appropriate your expertise, remember, that moment of disrespect might be the universe giving you permission to stop enabling them. To take your talents somewhere they'll be truly valued. To build something authentic rather than continuing to prop up something false. Your expertise deserves recognition. Your contributions deserve acknowledgement. Your light deserves to shine. And sometimes, the people who try to diminish you inadvertently give you the greatest gift of all, the freedom to finally build something worthy of who you truly are. 5 years after that life-changing holiday party, I found myself sitting in a federal courthouse, preparing to testify in what financial media had dubbed the trial of the decade. Not against Jason Reynolds, his story had ended years ago, but against Harrison Blake, the CEO of Westmoreland Capital, one of the largest investment firms in the country. The prosecution had called me as an expert witness, specifically because of the financial forensics methodology our firm had developed. What had begun as Project Lighthouse had evolved into a sophisticated system now used by regulatory agencies worldwide to detect complex financial crimes. Ms. Mitchell, the prosecutor began after I was sworn in, could you explain to the jury how you first identified the irregularities in Westmoreland Capital's offshore transactions? I adjusted the microphone and addressed the 12 jurors directly. It began with a pattern recognition algorithm we developed at Mitchell Rodriguez. The system identified unusual transaction rhythms across multiple jurisdictions, specifically the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and Bermuda. When legitimate transactions occur, they follow certain timing patterns dictated by business needs. Criminal transactions follow different patterns, dictated by the desire to avoid detection. From my position on the witness stand, I could see Harrison Blake watching me intently from the defense table. Unlike Jason, who had crumbled under investigation, Blake remained composed, expensive suit impeccable, silver hair perfectly styled. He looked every bit the financial titan he'd portrayed himself to be. And these patterns you identified, the prosecutor continued, what specifically indicated criminal activity rather than legitimate tax planning? 3 key indicators, I replied, turning to the large screen where my presentation was displayed. First, the systematic fragmentation of transactions to stay just below reporting thresholds. Second, the circular flow of funds through seemingly unrelated entities that ultimately return to the original source. And third, the correlation between these movements and specific federal filing deadlines, movements designed to create temporary facades rather than legitimate business structures. As I walked the jury through the forensic methodology, I couldn't help reflecting on how much had changed since I'd built the original Project Lighthouse algorithm in my apartment. After being fired, what had begun as a tool to understand one man's financial crimes had evolved into an industry-leading methodology for identifying systematic fraud. Ms. Mitchell, the prosecutor asked, based on your analysis, what was the total amount of money Westmoreland Capital concealed from regulatory oversight? $4.7 billion over an 8-year period, I stated clearly, knowing the number would shock the courtroom. Resulting in approximately $1.3 billion in evaded taxes. A murmur ran through the gallery. Even in a financial fraud case of this magnitude, the numbers were staggering. Blake's expression didn't change, but his attorney leaned over to whisper something in his ear. Unlike Jason, who had acted alone and panicked when exposed, Blake had an entire team of executives implicated in his scheme. They had operated with methodical precision for nearly a decade, creating one of the most sophisticated tax evasion structures ever uncovered. It had taken our combined expertise, Victoria's industry knowledge, my financial algorithms, and Elena's compliance frameworks, to fully map and document the scheme. The three of us had worked directly with federal prosecutors for 18 months preparing for this trial. After my testimony concluded and court adjourned for the day, I met Victoria and Elena in the courthouse cafeteria. Both had attended to provide moral support, though they would testify on different aspects of the case in the coming days. "You were brilliant," Victoria said, squeezing my hand. The jury was completely engaged, even with the technical details. "The visualizations helped," Elena added. "Breaking down complex financial structures into those color-coded flow charts made the criminal intent obvious even to non-experts." I nodded, still processing the experience. It felt surreal, explaining our methodology to take down someone like Blake. 5 years ago, I was sitting in my apartment trying to understand Jason's crimes. Now we're helping prosecute financial fraud at a global scale. "That's the power of expertise aligned with purpose," Victoria said. "What began as a tool created in a moment of crisis has become a system that's changing the entire industry." As we discussed the next phases of the trial, my phone buzzed with a notification. Opening it, I found an email from the dean of the Wharton School of Business, an invitation to give a guest lecture on financial forensics and ethical leadership. "Another speaking request?" Elena asked, noticing my expression. "Wharton," I confirmed. "They're launching a new ethics-focused finance curriculum and want all three of us to present our methodology as a case study." Victoria smiled. "From fired at a holiday party to teaching at Wharton. That's what I call a comeback story." But it was more than just a comeback. Our firm hadn't simply succeeded in conventional terms, we'd helped reshape the financial services industry. The Chen Mitchell Rodriguez Transparency Framework had been adopted by 6 major investment banks. Our approach to integrating compliance into financial strategy from the ground up rather than treating it as an afterthought had become an industry standard. Most importantly, we'd created a firm culture that recognized and rewarded genuine expertise. Regardless of title or tenure, junior analysts received credit for their innovations. Compensation was tied directly to value creation rather than hierarchical position. Transparency wasn't just a service we sold, it was the foundation of our organizational structure. That evening, after returning to my hotel room, I received an unexpected text message from an unknown number. "Your testimony was compelling. Coffee tomorrow?" HB Harrison Blake wanted to meet. Despite being in the middle of his trial, with me serving as an expert witness against him, he was reaching out directly, a serious breach of protocol and potentially illegal depending on his intentions. I immediately called the lead prosecutor to report the contact. She advised me not to respond and to forward any additional messages I might receive. "This is exactly what we'd expect from someone like Blake," she said. "He believes the normal rules don't apply to him." The next morning, as I prepared to return to the courthouse, the hotel concierge called to inform me that a package had been delivered for me. The sender had not identified themselves. With the prosecutor on speakerphone, I carefully opened the package to find a leather-bound journal with a lighthouse embossed on its cover. Inside was a handwritten note. "Ms. Mitchell, your expertise is wasted helping the government prosecute innovation. Consider the enclosed an opening offer to join Westmoreland's defense team instead. The number on the last page represents your annual compensation." HB, I turned to the last page to find a single number written in bold ink, $15 million. Harrison Blake was attempting to bribe an expert witness in the middle of his federal trial, an act so brazen it bordered on delusional. But it also revealed something profound about how people like Blake viewed the world. To him, everyone and everything had a price. Expertise was just another commodity to be purchased when useful, discarded when not. "This changes our strategy," the prosecutor said after I described the journal and note. "We're adding witness tampering to the charges. Don't bring this to court yet, we'll have federal agents collect it properly." 2 hours later, I was back on the witness stand, continuing my testimony about Westmoreland's financial structures. Blake watched me with the same composed expression, giving no indication he had just committed a serious federal crime by attempting to bribe me. As the prosecutor guided me through the evidence, I found myself thinking about the parallel between Blake and Jason Reynolds. Both had built their success on taking credit for others' expertise while engaging in financial crimes. Both believed their wealth and position placed them above accountability. Both saw people like me as tools to be used rather than professionals to be respected. But there was one crucial difference: Jason had crumbled when exposed, while Blake remained defiant, believing he could buy his way out of consequences just as he had bought his way out of every other problem in his life. After court adjourned, I met with Victoria and Elena to discuss the bribery attempt. Federal agents had collected the journal and were adding witness tampering to Blake's growing list of charges. $15 million, Elena mused, shaking her head. That's what he thinks your integrity is worth. It's not about integrity, I replied. It's about how people like Blake view expertise. To him, it's just another service to be purchased, not a professional value to be respected. That's why our firm model matters so much, Victoria said. We've built a culture where expertise is valued intrinsically, not just for what it can produce. The trial continued for another 3 weeks. Victoria testified about industry standards and how Westmoreland had deliberately subverted them. Elena explained compliance frameworks and how Blake's organization had created sophisticated systems specifically designed to bypass regulatory oversight. When the jury finally returned with their verdict, the courtroom was packed with financial journalists, industry leaders, and even several former Westmoreland executives who had cooperated with the prosecution in exchange for reduced sentences. On the count of conspiracy to commit tax fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of witness tampering, we find the defendant guilty. As the judge read through all 27 counts, finding Blake guilty on each one, I watched the composed facade finally crack. His shoulders slumped. The imperious expression faltered. For the first time, he looked his age, a 67-year-old man facing what would likely amount to a life sentence. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. Ms. Mitchell, how does it feel to help bring down another financial criminal? I considered my answer carefully. This case wasn't about bringing down an individual. It was about upholding principles that make our financial system work. When expertise is misused to conceal rather than reveal, when complexity becomes a tool for deception rather than legitimate business purposes, the entire system suffers. Would you say this case represents a turning point for Wall Street culture? Another reporter asked. Victoria stepped forward to answer. We hope it represents a return to fundamentals. Finance at its best is about allocating capital efficiently to create real value. At Mitchell Rodriguez, we believe expertise should serve that purpose, not subvert it. Elena added, compliance isn't about checking boxes. It's about ensuring transparency so markets can function properly. What we've demonstrated in this case is that even the most complex criminal financial structures can be mapped and understood when the right expertise is applied. As we made our way through the media scrum to our waiting car, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25, dressed in a modest suit that suggested she was just starting her professional career. Ms. Mitchell, she said, her voice slightly nervous. I just wanted to thank you. I'm in my first year as a financial analyst, and your testimony, the way you broke down those complex structures so clearly, it was inspiring. You've changed how I think about my role in the industry. That brief interaction affected me more deeply than the verdict itself. The idea that our work was influencing the next generation of financial professionals, helping them see that expertise carried responsibility, that technical skills should serve ethical purposes. That was the real victory. 1 month after the trial concluded, Mitchell Rodriguez hosted a special event at our headquarters. We were launching a new initiative, the Financial Transparency Fellowship, a program designed to identify and support emerging talent committed to ethical financial practices. The auditorium was filled with industry leaders, regulators, academics, and the 20 young professionals selected for the inaugural fellowship class. As I approached the podium to give the opening address, I felt a sense of purpose that went far beyond professional success. 5 years ago, I was publicly fired by a CEO who was simultaneously taking credit for my work while engaging in financial crimes. I began sharing the story that had become something of a legend in financial circles. That moment of humiliation could have been the end of my career. Instead, it became the catalyst for something much more meaningful. I gestured to Victoria and Elena, who sat in the front row alongside our firm's growing team of partners and associates. What we've built together isn't just a successful consulting practice. It's a model for how financial expertise can serve its highest purpose, creating transparent systems that generate genuine value rather than concealing extraction and fraud. Looking out at the diverse group of fellowship recipients, young professionals from various backgrounds, all committed to using their technical skills ethically, I felt a profound sense of optimism about the industry's future. The fellows we're welcoming today represent the next generation of financial leadership. They'll face challenges we haven't imagined and opportunities we can't foresee. But they'll approach those challenges with a fundamental understanding that expertise without ethics is not just worthless, it's dangerous. After the formal program concluded, I found myself speaking with Sophia Zhang, one of the fellowship recipients. She had recently completed her MBA and was working at a mid-sized investment firm. "Your story resonates with me so deeply," she confided. "Last year, my supervisor presented my analysis on a major client portfolio as his own work. When I tried to address it, he suggested I should be grateful for the exposure my ideas were getting through him." "How did you handle it?" I asked, recognizing the all-too-common scenario. "I documented everything," she replied with quiet confidence. "Every email, every presentation, every instance where my work was appropriated. Then I scheduled a meeting with the head of our division and laid out the evidence methodically. My supervisor was reassigned within a week." I smiled, recognizing the same methodical approach we had applied to much larger financial crimes. "You didn't just protect your own work, you revealed a pattern that was likely affecting others too." "Exactly," she nodded. 3 other analysts came forward after he was reassigned, sharing similar experiences. The firm has since implemented a new attribution policy for all client-facing materials. Sophia's story highlighted how the principles we had developed at scale could be applied to everyday workplace challenges. The same methodology that helped us map billion-dollar fraud schemes could help a young analyst protect her intellectual contributions. Later that evening, Victoria, Elena and I gathered in my office to toast the successful launch of the fellowship program. The view from our headquarters spanned the city skyline, lights glimmering against the darkening sky. "Sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come," I admitted, sipping my champagne. "From that holiday party humiliation to this." I gestured at our surroundings, the gleaming offices, the prestigious fellowship program, our firm's growing influence on industry practices. "It's not just about success," Elena reflected. "It's about impact. The Westmoreland case has already changed how regulators approach complex financial crimes. The transparency framework we developed is being taught in business schools. We're actually shifting how the industry operates." Victoria raised her glass. "To expertise aligned with ethics, the most powerful force in finance." As we clinked glasses, I thought about all the young professionals like Sophia who were just beginning their careers. They would face many of the same challenges we had: bosses who took credit for their work, pressure to compromise their values, systems designed to obscure rather than illuminate. But they would also have something we didn't have: starting out models for how to navigate those challenges with integrity, frameworks for applying their expertise ethically, examples of professionals who had succeeded without compromising their values. That was perhaps the most meaningful outcome of our journey. Not just building a successful firm or helping prosecute financial crimes, but creating a path others could follow, demonstrating that expertise aligned with ethics wasn't just morally superior but professionally advantageous. If you're listening to this and facing your own professional challenges, a boss taking credit for your work, pressure to compromise your values, systems that seem designed to hide rather than reveal truth, remember this: your expertise is too valuable to waste on those who won't acknowledge it. Your talents deserve a home where they're recognized and respected. The technical skills you've developed, the specialized knowledge you've acquired, the unique insights you bring, these are not just tools for earning a living. They're instruments for creating positive change, for illuminating what others might prefer to keep hidden, for building systems that serve their purpose with integrity. Sometimes the most painful professional experiences, being overlooked, undervalued, or even publicly humiliated, become catalysts for your greatest contributions. Not because suffering is necessary for growth, but because these moments force you to reevaluate where and how your expertise can best be applied. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations of professional challenges and ethical choices. Share your own experiences in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Your support means everything as I continue sharing lessons learned through difficult professional journeys. The path from that holiday party humiliation to testifying in a landmark financial fraud case wasn't easy or straightforward. It required finding the right partners, creating new methodologies, and remaining true to the purpose that drove us forward. But that's the thing about expertise aligned with ethics: it creates a foundation that can withstand challenges that would crumble systems built on deception and self-interest. It generates not just financial success but meaningful impact that extends far beyond your own career. Your knowledge, your skills, your unique professional perspective, these are lighthouse beams capable of guiding others safely to harbor while warning them away from dangerous shores. How you direct that light is perhaps the most important choice you'll make in your career. Choose wisely. Choose with purpose. Choose to illuminate rather than obscure. And remember that sometimes, the worst day of your professional life can become the first day of your most meaningful contribution, if you have the courage to rebuild with integrity at the foundation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.